Hi there. This session is about figuring out how good of an idea a sustainability improvement is. Small improvements may have amazing cost savings. Others may still be worthwhile even though they have a cost, but it depends on the financial situation of the business. But how can you tell? By the end of this session, you'll be able to calculate when and by how much stakeholders can save on certain sustainable improvements, compare the cost and savings of sustainable improvements with maintaining the status quo, determine what return stakeholders will get on their sustainable investments, and clearly identify all costs involved in an improvement over time. Today, we're going to look at 4 ways you can use to determine costs and savings for your sustainability improvements. We're going to look at payback periods, break-even points, return on investment, and life cycle costs. Let's use a lighting upgrade to take us through the steps of determining costs and savings. Since there are several ways of doing that, you may need to use a couple of different methods to see which one gives you the best information that you can give to your stakeholders. In this example, we're going to compare an eco-incandescent bulb with an LED bulb. It is amazing how much prices have changed over the last few years. When I looked at my version of this from a few years ago, the LED bulbs at that time were about $5 a piece, and it was still a better choice over the long run. Now I see that the prices have come down to the point where they're not much more than the eco-incandescent or halogen bulbs. As you can see here, the eco-incandescent bulb is a little over $1 and uses 43 watts, lasts a little bit less than a year. The LED bulb is $1.35, uses 9 watts, and has a 10-year lifespan. Just a note on halogen bulbs. Regular incandescent bulbs were banned a few years ago and were replaced by halogen bulbs. These bulbs are considered an eco-efficient choice because they use about 30% less energy than the old incandescent bulbs. Let's first look at the environmental side of the house. What are the energy savings if you upgrade from halogen to LED bulbs? As you can see in this example, first, you should convert the energy use from watts to kilowatts per hour. That is simply a matter of moving the decimal point 3 places. If you are using a light for 8 hours a day, multiply the kilowatt hours by the number of hours, 8. As you can see, the halogen bulb uses a kilowatt hour of energy every 3 days, while the LED bulb uses a kilowatt hour of energy every 14 days. If you have a business that works 5 days a week and is closed on national holidays, then you're open about 250 days a year. That equates to 86 kilowatt hours for the halogen bulb over the course of 1 year and about 18 kilowatt hours for the LED. That is a savings of almost 80%. Even when comparing the 2 bulbs that claim to be eco-efficient, this is a great reduction of environmental impact. When you do this for your own workplace or home, remember to adjust these numbers for your own use. So, what are the cost savings over the life of the product? How much will you save if you switch from halogen to LED bulbs? Well, an LED bulb should last as long as 10 years, so we'll use that in our calculations. Starting with the kilowatt hours you've already calculated, multiply it by the cost of energy from the utility company, which you'll have to check with the stakeholder or the utility. This tends to range from about 7 cents to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. We're going to use 10 cents in this example, or $1 over 10 years. Then multiply it by the number of bulbs. I'm using 50 bulbs for this example, making the cost of energy over 10 years, which is the life of the LED bulb, The business or residents will pay $4,300 just for electricity to power the 50 light bulbs versus $900 for the LEDs. But that is not all the costs. Because the halogen bulbs, according to the manufacturer, last a little bit less than a year, and we've calculated that to be about 10 and a half months, you'll have to buy replacement bulbs for them. That adds up to 556 bulbs, as opposed to the 50 bulbs that you would have had just with the LED, against the price of the bulb, which equates to over $500 over the 10 years. As a result, the total savings over 10 years are almost $4,000. Please note that this does not include embodied energy that is used in manufacturing of a bulb, which is outside of the scope of this lesson. You can avoid that cost by phasing in the change instead of changing out all of the bulbs at once. This slows the growth of savings a little bit, but reduces the impact of embodied energy. Finally, don't forget the third part of the triple bottom line: people. There are people savings that come from using longer lasting bulbs. People do not have to take the time and effort needed to purchase and change the halogen bulbs. They also avoid any potential safety issues involved with climbing on ladders to change can lights or other inconveniently located lights. And finally, there are the labor costs for hourly workers. Or if your workers are salaried, there's something called opportunity costs, because the time spent on this effort takes away from the time available for other projects. So, when will you start to see the savings in your project? This can be an important factor in determining whether a project gets a green light. Leadership likes projects that pay for themselves and then start saving the company money. But the length of time companies are willing to wait to achieve savings is variable. Some are willing to wait 3 years, others are unhappy if they don't start saving in 18 months. A simple calculation for when you start seeing savings is a payback period. Let's start with the energy used in 1 year by the 2 different light bulb options. Remember, we calculated it for 10 years before. Just make sure that you're looking at 1 year for this exercise. Subtract the amount of the more energy efficient bulb from the amount used by the halogen bulb to get your expected annual energy savings. Then multiply it by the cost of energy to get the expected annual dollar savings. Next, retrieve the total cost of the improvement. Don't forget to include installation, training, and special software or apps or any other costs for the improvement. Obviously, in the case of LED bulbs, we just have the cost of the bulbs. The formula for payback period is the cost of the improvement divided by the expected annual savings. As you can see in this case, the payback period is very short, about 2.5 months. Notice that the formula doesn't immediately give you a number of months. It gives you a whole number for complete years and a decimal for a portion of the year, like 2/10 of the year. You should take the next step to convert that to months by multiplying the decimal amount by 12. Don't worry about being too precise, because you really don't know how much energy will be used. Maybe the employees will be working extra long hours. Or we may not know exactly how much the bulbs will cost. They may be cheaper. Or we may not know how long the bulbs will last. The halogen bulb may last longer, or the LED may only last 7 years. Note, if you have taken a course in financial management, you may remember discount rates that are used when calculating savings that may occur over a longer period of time, because you have to account for the time value of money. That is beyond the scope of this lesson, but you should check with the business to see what they normally use. An even more convincing method to give leadership a visual, like a graph, especially one that shows savings in a dramatic way, is the break-even chart. It turns the payback period into a line chart. Well, how do we do that? In Excel, set up a table to create a line chart. In the first column, put the time frames. Usually we use years, but following along with the example that we've been using, we already know that the payback period is only 2.5 months. So it's more appropriate in this case to use months. Definitely use years unless a different timeline makes sense. In the next column, put the cumulative monthly costs for one option. In other words, put the first month's cost in the first row, then add the first month to the second month for the second row, then add that total to the third month, and so on. Since halogen bulbs last less than a year, you will need to add the cost of an additional bulb towards the end of the year. In the third column, put the cumulative monthly costs for the other option. Now that you have the data entered in Excel, highlight the 3 columns and insert a line chart. Select the style that you think conveys the information best. Note where the 2 lines cross. They should cross approximately where you calculated the payback period would be, in this case 2.5 months, and you should put an arrow there to highlight when you would start saving money. If you look to the right-hand side of the chart, you can easily say the savings at the end of the chart's time period, in this case 1 year. You will be saving about 2/3 of the lighting costs. In subsequent years, there are even more savings. 65% savings in the first year. The last potentially compelling calculation that you can make is the return that stakeholders will receive on their investment. It is a simple formula of savings over the useful life of the product minus the costs divided by the costs, and then multiplied by 100. As you can see, in this case, the ROI for this project is huge. So the question is, why would I ever buy a halogen bulb? Why are there so many for sale in the big box stores? Well, there are a couple of reasons why you might want to buy halogen bulbs. First, halogen bulbs are still best when it comes to seeing accurate colors, if that's important to you. More importantly, if you live in northern climes, halogen bulbs put out more heat than LEDs, which reduces the amount of heating that your HVAC system needs to provide. When the old incandescent bulbs were outlawed in Canada, and they did that before we did it in the US, carbon emissions actually went up because Canadians needed to use more coal and oil to replace the heat lost from the incandescent bulbs that were helping to heat their homes. And why did I not talk about CFL bulbs? CFL bulbs have a cost that usually falls in between a halogen and an LED. They are better at reducing emissions than halogen, but not as good as LEDs. They do not come on as quickly as LED or halogen bulbs, and the quality of the light is dimmer. Finally, you can't discard a CFL bulb, when it burns out because it has a small amount of mercury. It has to be disposed of properly, like any fluorescent tube lighting. Now it's your turn. Calculate the payback period, break-even point, and ROI for a sustainability project. You can use LED replacements for T12s, or T8 fluorescent bulbs, a faucet aerator or water sense fixture, solar panels, or any other project that you might be likely to do in the future. Here is an example for solar panels using typical costs found on the website that is at the bottom of this slide. If the current annual energy costs are $4,000 and you purchase a system that costs $20,000, the payback period is 5 years. If the solar system has a 20-year lifespan, then the return on the investment is about 200%. If you finance the system, it will extend your payback period, but you will not have to pay such a hefty amount up front, which may be hard to do. There are a lot of financing packages available that will lower your monthly electrical bill from the start and eventually allow you to do away with your electric bill entirely, usually after about 10 years. The break-even chart for this particular calculation is on the next slide. Here you can clearly see that the break-even point is at 5 years, but even more valuable to convey to the stakeholders is the savings over the life of the solar panels, which is about $60,000. In the last part of this session, we're going to take a look at life cycle costing, or adding a careful review of all the costs associated with an upgrade, whether it is a greener choice or not. Life cycle costing is important because it gives the leadership a holistic, complete picture of expenses over the entire life of a project. It also motivates stakeholders to select higher quality, longer lasting products and improvements so as to avoid the additional replacement costs. A savvy stakeholder appreciates knowing the whole score. It helps with planning and reduces unpleasant surprises. Leaders hate surprises. So what is life cycle costing? LCCs identify all the acquisition costs, including the initial cost and installation, operations, maintenance, and disposal costs, including remnant and end-of-life costs. In more detail, the acquisition costs would include the number of units of the product that you're going to get, the lifespan, purchase price, and installation costs. The operations costs definitely include the energy and the number of hours operations per year and miles per year, whatever the other operations costs are. Maintenance costs include spare parts and other maintenance costs. And remnant value includes the cost to take it back, if there is any. Sometimes companies will charge $25 to take back and dispose of a computer, or the remnant value, you may be able to sell it. This is the format that is generally used for LCCs. It has all of the expenses over either quarters or years, depending on the lifespan of the product or the project. It has a lot of categories here. Only use the categories of expenses that apply to your project. For example, let's take a look at an LCC on an improvement that proposes transitioning to paperless operations by using iPads in the field instead of paper forms. This may be an option for any business that uses forms to track work done in the field, HVAC, landscaping, home inspections, or it can even be used in manufacturing operations that want real-time quality and environmental management system. As you can see, this LCC includes the iPads, the accessories, Apple Pencils and protective covers, store installation of any special software or hardware, the apps needed to track the work, training, the energy needed to charge the iPads, the labor needed to troubleshoot, maintain, or upgrade the device, and insurance for dropped or broken iPads, and finally, disposal costs. And you can see here in year one, you have a price for every one of those except for disposal costs. In years 2, 3, and 4, you can see you only need to include the costs of the energy to charge the iPads and the training. And in the 5th year, when you have to replace them, or you're likely to need to replace them, you have all of the same prices as you had in year 1, plus you have the disposal costs that are added at the end. And this gives you a total over 5 years, including the 2 sets of iPads and equipment, of about $17,000. A thorough review will generate discussions on how to reduce costs, like avoiding disposal costs by donating the iPads to a worthy cause. Leadership will probably also want a comparison of costs with the status quo, like boxes and boxes and boxes of paper forms. But a complete analysis would include measures of improved operations, like fewer errors and increased speed, as well as the environmental benefits. Now it's your turn. Using the Excel template provided, compute the life cycle costs for one sustainable product. You'll find some ideas here. Be sure to delete the categories that don't apply. For an additional challenge, create a second LCC for a standard product to compare the cost with the greener product. See if there's a significant difference. Is it worth it? The bottom line you have to ask yourself as you do these analyses: will your project be accepted, funded, and implemented? The best way to assure this is to strengthen your arguments by stressing all of the benefits of the project. If you can, address all 3 elements of the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. We know we need to address costs and potential savings because profit is what stakeholders need to continue business operations. As sustainability managers, we always look at environmental benefits, although we don't always quantify or describe them in terms that are meaningful to stakeholders. The area we often forget is the people side of the equation. Sustainability improvements often improve the quality of the workplace and increase morale because people feel good when they are helping to protect the planet. In this session, we covered a number of ways to analyze the cost of sustainability. These analyses are important because companies need to balance their sustainable choices by using the triple bottom line. And profit is very important to stakeholders, or their business will not stay in business. You can use this information along with a simple cost-benefit T-table and decision matrix to help you justify the recommendations you will be making to your stakeholders.